All right, YouTube, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. It is Thursday, December 26th. We have a 9-game NBA slate to dive into in today's video. Like we always do, I'm going to dive into each and every one of these games. I'll give you my prediction on the side. I'll give you my prediction on the total. We'll talk about any other plays, like player props that we like within the game as well. But as always, guys, keep an eye down on the pinned comment. That'll take you to all of my final plays for free if that does interest you. But like I said, 9 games, December 26th. Hopefully everyone had a great Christmas yesterday. Yeah. We sure as hell did. Look at that, a 4-0 night. You know what? I'm forgetting a special guest here. Of course, we got some presents on Christmas, but we also got some money. Let's go, a 4-0 sweep on Christmas. You know what's great is that 4-0 in the NBA, right? We also went 4-0 in the damn NFL. So you know what? We'll take the cha-ching. We'll pump in some damn crowd noise. What an amazing Christmas. Now, I will say the negative of Christmas. I am reporting to you live from massive hangover central now, so obviously that kind of stinks. But you know what? We did go 4-0 in both the NFL and the NBA. I can't complain too much. But anyways, let's go ahead and dive into this slate. Before we do, I didn't have a ride of the day yesterday, but make sure to get your ride of the day entry. So use that hashtag ride of the day in the comments down below. I jump on board with the one person's play, give you a shout out in the next video, win or loss. I will say I'm going to be traveling today, so I'm heading out to the West Coast in a few hours here. We got a couple more videos to do, so hopefully we'll get a ride of the day in there. But, you know, obviously, if we don't, then we'll just move it to the next day and the next day. But we didn't have one yesterday, which is great because that means nobody lost the ride of the day. I'd hate to drop a womp for a Christmas ride of the day that loses, right? So maybe that's like a blessing in disguise, but who knows? It could have been a win. But either way, get those hashtag ride of the days in the comments. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive into this slate. We're starting it off with Indiana taking on OKC. So Indiana actually has dominated this head-to-head over the last few years here, like last 5 years or so. They're 8-2 in terms of winning, and then even against the spread, I believe that they're 7-3. So for whatever reason, they do have the number of this OKC team, but we're dating back like 2019, right? Those numbers are a little bit off. I will say Indiana's rolling right now. In their last 7 games here, they are 6-1. Against the spread, they're 6-1 as well. OKC, though, you can make the exact same argument. Now they are kind of rolling too. So this is a spot in which I do think that if you are betting Indiana, I get it, and I understand that you can have a lane to get there. But overall, the way that this OKC team plays is, one, they'll take it to the paint if they need to. They can shoot in the mid-range. They can also shoot the 3. The 3 is what Indiana probably will be decent at stopping, but in the paint, Indiana's been tough this season in terms of not stopping points, right? 4th most points in the paint so far this year, whereas you're having an OKC team that, like I said, 1, they'll shoot there at a decent frequency, and 12th in terms of points in the paint over the season. So I expect that that's where OKC kind of does their damage and makes Indiana, you know, not be able to stop them. So yeah, I like the OKC Thunder in this spot. But I do get the path to Indiana, you know. If neither one of these teams are going to shoot a bunch of threes or anything like that, then Indiana may be able to say, okay, well then let's just focus on the paint. I know we've been bad at, you know, covering the paint all season long, but let's try and shore it up. That's a lot harder to do. You know, it's easier said than done, which is why I like OKC. But there are a couple paths to get to Indiana here. In terms of a total 227, I'm going to correlate it to the idea of there being a lot of paint points for OKC and whatnot. And OKC is the slower paced team. Indiana, last 10 games here, sitting at the 8th fastest team. OKC, 19th, right? So bottom half of the league. I think that they slow it down. And again, there's going to be a lot of 2-point field goal attempts versus them shooting it from 3 on both sides. Both teams, by the way, are good at preventing 3. So that helps the under, which is where I'm leaning in terms of the total. But I think, you know, Indiana's defensive presence will be felt in the perimeter. So OKC says, okay, let's take it inside. And if we're counting by 2s here, it's a lot harder to hit an over. Now, I do have a couple player prop spots that I'm liking. First off, I already mentioned points in the paint are an issue for Indiana. So maybe you target someone like, I mean, Shea's numbers are going to be crazy, but you can also look at someone like Jalen Williams, that type of thing, because he's going to shoot a lot of points in the restricted area, and he leads the team in terms of the last 10 games, field goal attempts per game in the paint. So outside of the restricted area, but still in the paint. But one other thing that I've noticed is that Indiana, from the left corner and from the right corner, both of those spots, they allow a 45% field goal percentage against in terms of 3-pointers from, again, the left corner and the right corner. You target a corner 3 shooter, you're talking about Lou Dort here for the Thunder. So I like this spot. He's going to jack a couple of those a game. He's also going to take a few 3s too. So we're getting his number at 1.5. Has he hit this consistently on the season? I wouldn't say that. He'll either have games where he has like 4 or 0. In fact, in his last 4 games, 0, 0, 4, 0, right? So I think that he's situationally someone to target. Not always, but 1.5 threes here at minus 140 over on FD right now. just bet it. New collection dropped on the Fade Me store, guys. Go check it out, fademe.store, guybostonsports.com/store. But it might be something that we say, hey, you know what? He hasn't been doing it all that consistently, but this situation's good. Let's just bet it. So Lou Dort over 1.5 threes is a player prop that I consider. All right, this is a tough one. We got Washington taking on Charlotte. There are a couple spots on this slate that I'm like, what are we even doing here? Like the last game, right? So stay tuned for that. But we do have Washington taking on Charlotte. I don't think that I have anything that's egregiously, on the hot seat right now. I probably end up looking at Washington because they are the home team, and that's the only reason why. I don't think that I touch this game, but obviously, format of show, we go through each game, we will go through it. So in terms of these two teams, Washington did just beat them, and that was at home, 7 days ago, a week ago. So clearly they have the head-to-head, and Washington overall 6-4 in their last 10 here, in the last 2 years too, against the Charlotte team. If we want to talk defense and anything like that, I don't think there's much to get into, but one thing I will say is Washington will elect to shoot a lot more threes than they do in terms of getting it into the paint. Charlotte's paint defense actually has been, viable this year. Like, it's been okay. Their perimeter defense has been the issue. So Washington, doesn't surprise me that they won a week ago, right? Because they're going to jack a bunch of threes. Last 10 games, the 4th highest frequency from above the break. So I think that that's where they kind of win this one. Again, you're getting points at home for a team that just saw this team and beat them. Could you make the argument, well, Charlotte's going to bounce back and now they win because they're both kind of bad teams. They'll just split their 2-game little series here. I get that, but to me, the shooting zones and whatnot lean towards Washington. In terms of a total, boy, do I have a tough time pegging this one. I would say, yeah, we're sitting at 225 right now, right? Neither one of these teams strikes me as the most efficient offense, but neither team is the most efficient defense. So you kind of pick your poison here. I would say it was, 123 to 115 last time they played. I think that we see something similar, especially if I like the idea of Washington shooting a lot of threes. We know that Charlotte will shoot a decent amount of threes as well, right? So I'll lean towards the over, but again, I'm probably not touching this game in all honesty. I know I just mentioned it a couple minutes ago, but we did launch a new collection on the merch store. This one right here. Just do it? No. Just bet it. Way better at saying, right? Guys, head over to guybostonsports.com/store or fademe.store. This drops today. It is new. It's fairly limited. I don't think that we have, there's a decent amount behind it, so I don't know if we'll sell out, but hey, you guys could prove me wrong. Go ahead and check it out. Again, that's guybostonsports.com/store, guybostonsports.com/store. One more time, guybostonsports.com/store. We're also doing a big sale over there as well, so the new stuff is not going to be discounted or promoted in terms of having a promotion on them, but tons of the other products like this OG GMBLR hoodie is going to be on sale and whatnot too. So head over there, guys, guybostonsports.com/store. I'll say it one more time. We have a ton of new stuff as well as some discounted product. All right, Orlando taking on Miami now. Miami did just lose to Orlando in a weird fashion, right? Like, Miami was crushing them all game long, and then they scored 2 fourth-quarter points, and Orlando ended up winning that game 121-114. There are a couple injuries to look for in this one. Jimmy Butler listed as doubtful, Terry Rozier listed as questionable, and obviously, the Wagner brothers both out in this one, and Banchero. Gary Harris also listed as a game-time decision. So this is a spot in which I do think Miami probably kind of, bounces back in a sense. But no, Jimmy Butler doesn't affect me and how I think about this Heat team as much as it might have, a couple of years ago. So to me, I still think that, Miami catching points in this one, not the worst spot for them. This Orlando team, I'm pretty low on overall, but they do keep trying to keep consistent, I should say, proving people wrong with, they get injured, they can't do this. And that's they're still having, they're 19-12. They're 12-2 at home, which kind of worries me here. But to me, Miami just blowing that lead and whatnot just speaks to them probably looking forward to this game a little bit more than Orlando. So I'll lean towards Miami, or maybe on the money line because you're getting plus money, or that plus 1.5. Obviously, those points could come in handy. In terms of the total, right now it's at 208. That is obviously super low, but we're not going to get fast pace out of either one of these teams. Orlando, over the last 10 games, 28th in terms of pace. Miami, 26th in terms of pace. You put those together, they're averaging right around the 27th fastest team in the league, and both of these teams do cover well in transition. So I think I'm going to lean, even though it might be crazy, even though it's at 208, I think I still do lean towards an under. I think a lot of people could look at this and be like, well, last time it was 121-114. It's like, cool, that was last time, and it took a massive comeback by Orlando, right? Like, I think that if this game goes more according to plan, we see less points. So, yeah, it could be kind of crazy, leaning towards a 208 under, but I really can't get to the over. I should phrase it like that. And then player prop-wise, nothing's jumping off the page to me here. All right, Atlanta taking on Chicago. Now, this is weird because I would say Atlanta's the better team. I don't know by how much, but I would say they're the better team. The thing is that Chicago's been great on two things, I guess. Chicago's been great on the road this year. Their road record's 9-6. Their home record is 4-11. So clearly they almost prefer to play on the road here. And they seem to have this Atlanta Hawks number. 2 times they've played back in November, and as underdogs, Chicago won both of those games outright. And they didn't just win, they won the first one by 12 points. They won the next one, I think it was like 14 points. So they've been matching up well and beating the you-know-what out of this Atlanta Hawks team. Now, a couple things to note injury-wise. DeSumo and Giddey listed as game-time decisions for the Chicago side of things. Okongwu still out. Bogdanovich and Trae Young listed as questionable for Atlanta. So those are going to be massive spots to keep an eye on. If Trae Young doesn't play, then obviously that's going to be a blow to the Hawks. And even Okongwu, I do think Okongwu has been, I want to say, out for, has it been 2 games, 3 games, whatever it is. The Hawks haven't looked all that tremendous. They've kind of come back down to earth a little bit, right? Still 6-4 in the last 10, but if you look at it from the last 6 perspective, they're 2-4 in their last 6, right? Now they've played some decent teams. If we go back and just look at his last 10 games, these last 10 games, ready? Minnesota, Memphis, San Antonio, Milwaukee, New York, Denver, Lakers, Milwaukee. Then they had New Orleans and Charlotte, and they beat both of them. So maybe it's a strength of schedule thing, but overall, this Atlanta team isn't in the best of places. Whereas Chicago, yes, they lost to Milwaukee. Yes, they lost to Boston, but before that, they had rattled off 3 straight wins. I think Chicago matches up well against this Atlanta team. I'm going to lean, shocker, I'm going to lean towards Atlanta here still, because they've beat them twice. It's really hard to beat a team 3 times in a row, right? In terms of Chicago being Atlanta. But I can see a total path to being like, well, Chicago should be able to attack the perimeter, which is obviously, where there's a flaw in the Atlanta system defensively. In Chicago, like I said, above the break threes, second most in the entire league in terms of corner threes, third most in terms of frequency that they take over the last 10 games, and they're scoring the second most points from 3. So it makes total sense here as to why, Chicago's beat Atlanta 2 times so far this year. My biggest thing is, well, what if we just flip the script? Chicago can't stop a nosebleed at the rim. Atlanta, second in the league in terms of points in the paint so far this season. Number 1 in terms of their last 10 games of rim restricted area field goal attempts per game. So I think that, yes, we've seen Chicago match up well, but that's just the way that the ball bounced in that game, right? I think that Atlanta comes in here and says, let's take it to the rim, if they're healthy, by the way, and then they can kind of control this one. So, yeah, give me a revenge spot for Atlanta on their home floor, -6.5. That total at 242, well, it's way up there because you have the number 3 and number 4 pace team in the entire league over the last 10 games here playing one another. So obviously that's going to be high. I don't think that I could ever touch a 242.5 total and say I want to go over, but I would feel pretty silly leaning towards an under. You know what I mean? Like this is obviously 2 fast-paced teams that, in terms of defensive efficiency, they're not totally there. It's like, yeah, no kidding, both teams could probably get up to 120, 125. Last time they've played, it was 136, 122, and then 125, 113. So we've seen high-scoring games from them already so far this year. So I'll lean over, but I don't think I get there myself. It seems kind of crazy to go out there and put your hard-earned bread to expect, 250 points, but it also seems pretty silly and crazy to think that these 2 teams would play under basketball. But yeah, it's a little weird. Now, in terms of player props here, we got a couple spots to look at. Again, I would target points in the paint and field goal attempts in the paint and restricted area for this Atlanta team, which would be Jalen Johnson. Kind of jumps off the page, especially if we see Trae Young, not play. I think there's going to be a big scoring load on Jalen Johnson, which in terms of his line, let's see if we can pull up an updated line here. Jalen Johnson's line right now, points-wise, is 20.5. Head-to-head against the Bulls this year, one game he had 20. He landed right there on the hook, right? 34 minutes of play. He shot 55%. The next game, he shot the ball 19 times and scored 25 against him. So I don't mind that spot again. He's going to shoot a lot of Atlanta's points in the paint, which I do think is Chicago's weakness. Now, you flip it over and you say, okay, well, what are we going to target on the Chicago side of things player prop-wise? Anybody that shoots on the perimeter. So you're talking, Zach LaVine, Kobe White, even Big Vooch. We've cashed on him a few times this year, right? Maybe that's a spot. And I will say Atlanta, 2 opposing centers, allowing the most points in the league over the last 7 games and the most threes in the league over the last 7 games. So Big Vooch could have a night as well, not just from outside, but in the paint. But I do think that I would target his threes as well as points if we went in that direction. Like I mentioned, there are some games on the slate that I really don't have much interest in. This would be one of them. You have Memphis, who, by all things considered, better team than Toronto, right? and they're laying 11.5. I think that 11.5 is a little bit much. I still can't really get to the Toronto side of things, especially with some of the injuries like Jakob Poeltl's out. That's going to be massive because Memphis likes to score in the paint. So yeah, I can't get to Toronto. I would lean Memphis, but I don't think that I'm laying 11.5 points here in this spot. Memphis is at home. I do think that that's big. They're 7-6 on the road this year, 13-4 at home. And you look at Toronto. Toronto has one win on the road this season. Now, they've been covering. That's what I've said all year long, right? Even on the road, they've covered in 57% of their games. Memphis, 71% of their games they've covered at home. So they kind of trump them there as well. Give me Memphis, laying a huge number, but still, I can't get to that Toronto side of things. Total sitting at 238 in this one. I think that's honestly a little bit high, but it makes sense, right? You have Memphis, who's playing faster than anybody right now, and they're scoring. Yes, they're not shooting a crazy amount of threes, but they're getting into the paint. They're scoring at such an efficiency that they're running up numbers, even with the idea that they're shooting and counting by twos, right? And then Toronto, terrible defense, and they're playing at the 6th fastest pace. So I get why that number's up there. I think it's a little bit too high because I think Toronto could be like, yeah, we're out of this one, or throw in the fact that I said Memphis is going to shoot a lot of 2-pointers. I'm going to lean under. I don't even know if I could get there myself. Now, in terms of player props, I would, again, kind of just target the weakness here, which to me would be Toronto's points in the paint allowed. The problem is you're going to have, Ja Morant, his number is going to be up there, and that's kind of the only thing. Maybe Jaren Jackson Jr. could be a look because, Jakob Poeltl's not going to be on the other side of things, making things overly, hard. Zach Edey, who, I don't know if he's worth betting on and that type of thing, but he did have Christmas Eve, right? He had, 14 boards, so I think that he could, and he had 2 points, right, which is crazy, but he could kind of eat down there because, again, yes, the Raptors have, Kelly Olynyk and was Mojo or whatever the guy's name is and all that. It's nobody's Jakob Poeltl's the brute down there, right? They don't have him. It's a big loss. So I'd target anything around the rim for Memphis, whether it's rebounds or points in the paint, scoring, points over, that type of thing. We'll see. Keep an eye on the final plays for anything like that. All right, Pelicans taking on the Rockets here. Now, this Rockets team's having obviously a very good season, right? And anytime we're looking at the Pelicans, I always think about points in the paint, and that's kind of where, I don't want to say make their bread and whatnot, but that's where they can keep a game close. Houston happens to be a good defense in terms of points in the paint, and we saw this matchup, a few days ago, and Houston beat them by 20. There's no reason to me why that game wouldn't go any similar to this. I mean, you still have no Brandon Ingram, no Zion Williamson. Now Trey Murphy's listed as questionable. No Alvarado. Green's out. There's just so many injuries on the side of the Pelicans. Dillon Brooks is out for Houston, and that is a factor, but to me, they're still a very good defensive team. You put Amin Thompson in there, and yeah, I just don't see any easy points from the Pelicans. So the way I probably end up playing this would be considering Pelicans team total under. I do like Houston. I do think on the road it's a little bit different. So far this season in terms of covering on the road, they've been okay, right? I think it's 58%, 57%, which is good. New Orleans at home though is covered in 54% of the game, so it's kind of a pretty slim margin there. The one thing I'll say is that just looking at it straight up, Houston way better in terms of being at home this year. They're 11-3 straight up, just 9-5 on the road. So I don't know if this is a target spot for them. Houston was home and they beat them by 20, a week ago or so. So this is probably one where I say, yeah, the defense still comes through. I don't know about winning by 8 points. I think Houston wins, but I'm going to go, Pelicans team total under here. So yeah, I guess I would still lean Houston and the under, but the hybrid of those two plays would probably be Pelicans team total under. All right, Milwaukee taking on Brooklyn. Now, we want to keep an eye on the injury report. Lillard, Middleton, and Giannis all listed as game-time decisions. And then I believe we have no Cam Thomas still, right? We have no Bogdanovich. Ben Simmons listed as questionable. Finney Smith listed as questionable. So pretty much everyone and their grandma's ex-boyfriend are questionable in this game. The one thing I'll say, if Giannis plays or Lillard plays, maybe even if it's just Giannis, I like the Bucks in this spot. I mean, Giannis was vocal about not playing on Christmas and that the league, didn't pick the right teams and that type of thing. I'm paraphrasing, but I expect him the day after Christmas at home here playing against the Brooklyn Nets team, who are not the best defensive team overall, right? I expect Giannis to try to make a point if he plays. So yeah, I like Giannis's points. I like Milwaukee to cover. And then in terms of that total, I like Milwaukee's team total over. Because again, I do think, maybe I'm reading too much into the narrative here, but I do think that this is a spot where, they're like, why didn't we play on Christmas? Here, this is what you missed. You know what I mean? That type of thing. So that's my simple way of looking at this game. It's not the most data approached or based, but it is kind of how I'm thinking. If you wanted some data here, it's like, okay, well, Brooklyn starting to slow down in terms of covering the perimeter. Milwaukee shooting a ton of threes. So is Milwaukee. So I don't mind an over 213.5 either, but I like my Milwaukee's team total over. And then Brooklyn, especially if I think Giannis is going to play well, Brooklyn can't really stop anything at the paint, whereas the Bucks do. So they should be able to at least take one thing out of Brooklyn's bag, which is the points in the paint. I like Milwaukee in this spot. More so just for that narrative, like I said. But if you want a data, it's I think that both teams can struggle to some degree on the perimeter. But when it comes to paint points, which is where I think that they can make their hay, there's kind of a lopsided affair there. Player prop-wise, like I said, the only thing I'd probably look at here is a potential look at Giannis to score in the paint. That's the weakness of this Brooklyn team, and it's probably, I'd say that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. All right, Sacramento taking on Detroit. Guys, we are so dang close to the potential revival of the Kings. They've been on the DMB graveyard 6 feet under for so long. By the way, Domantas, you killed us a couple times. I know that he's had some good games, but we engraved that face of his right on the headstone, and he is, along with the Kings, also in the DMB graveyard for now. And he came close each time. If you guys don't know what the DMB graveyard is, someone does us wrong, a team does us wrong, we throw them in here. We give a potential revival date. After that date, we gotta wait to see and have them prove themselves before being able to roll with them. Now, it doesn't impact leans, right? Like in this game, we'll get into it. If I think that Sacramento is still the best spot, I will tell you guys and give you my opinion. I'm just not putting my hard-earned bread on that team until the new year because they've done us wrong so many times. But anyways, Sabonis being a newly added piece to the pie here in terms of the DMB graveyard, which is okay with me because this Detroit team, if they do one thing good defensively, it's cover points in the paint. Both of these teams, you want to target the perimeter, which is why I would say I think Detroit can kind of keep this one somewhat close. If you're on Sacramento, do not let me talk you off it, and I'm not being salty because Sacramento's done us wrong. I actually do think the matchup somewhat favors Detroit because, again, Sacramento is going to try and score in the paint, right? Second most shots in the paint in terms of the last 10 games from a frequency perspective, and Detroit's been decent at stopping that. 9th best on the season, on the road this year, 9th best, 8th in the last three games. So, yeah, it seems like it's a decent spot. The thing that I think Detroit ends up keeping us close, I talked about you targeting the perimeter. Well, Detroit's been a better shooting team from the perimeter so far this season. Above the break threes in the last 10 games, they're shooting nearly 41%, right? And they're scoring middle of the pack in terms of points per game from three, whereas Sacramento's nearly bottom 5 in the league. I think it's like bottom 6. So, yeah, I think that's going to be the distinguishing factor. Give me Detroit plus the 6 points in this one. Do I get there myself? I don't know. It's going to take some cojones to still roll with Detroit, right? But overall, I could see this being a close-ish matchup. There are some injuries to note. I know I talked about Sabonis already. He's listed as probable, so I'm expecting him to play. And then Jalen Duren on the other side listed as probable as well. Those are the only things to worry about right now. Isaiah Stewart, he could be coming back. He's listed as a game-time decision. But the main guys, especially when I'm talking about perimeter, are looking like they're good to go. So Cade Cunningham, Fox, that type of thing. Where we'd go from a total perspective here, I guess I would slightly lean over. Might not be the smartest thing when you're talking about, Detroit and stuff. I think they've been faster as of late, but just still an inconsistent offense, right? Like they're 18th in terms of offensive efficiency here. But neither defense strikes me as this world-beating defense. And I just mentioned that I think a lot of points are going to come from the perimeter for both teams here. So it's kind of the opposite of when I say we're counting by 2s. I think this could be a spot in which we're counting by 3. So I'll lean towards the over. And then from player prop perspective, I've kind of already tipped my hand, right? I would target anyone that's going to shoot from 3. So taking a peek, maybe let's see what his line is. Before I give this out, I want to see what the line is. Overall, what I'm looking at is Malik Monk here. I want to see what his 3-point line is because I think that 2.5 could be a decent spot for him. Maybe even Malik Monk's points. I think it's 17. Yeah, it's 17.5 right now. He's only hit that in 7 of his 23 games this year. That ain't all that high. But I do think that he'll get the run, and I think that he's going to fit the bill a little bit to beat this Detroit team. DeMar DeRozan could also be a good one because Detroit stinks at covering the mid-range, and Sacramento shoots a lot of mid-range because of DeMar DeRozan. So both Malik Monk and him could have good games. DeMar not so much fitting the bill of that, like, perimeter type of guy, right? But I think both of those guys, maybe there's same game parlay potential here of, 15 plus and 20 plus type of a thing for some decent odds. Keep an eye on the final plays. All right, like I said, stay tuned for this one. We got Portland taking on Utah. I don't think that I have the strongest of takes on this game, which if you're watching this and you do have a huge play in this game and you love it, I'm sounding the psycho alert alarm for you. This is definitely Charlotte and Washington, and then this game is kind of like, what are we even doing here, right? Now, where I would go in this one is I guess fairly simple. I think I'd consider Portland as they get a little bit more healthy. Simon's back, Ayton's down there. You have John Collins, Keontae Georgia says questionable here. So yeah, I mean, I think I'd lean towards the home team, but it feels kind of crazy. Even I'll take that cycle alert alarm too, right? It feels kind of crazy leaning towards Portland as favorites, doesn't it? Like that just seems, I don't know, it leaves a terrible taste in my mouth. So I'd go Portland. I think that they can probably win the paint battle here to some degree. And then even from a Utah perspective, it's like they might be able to shoot them some threes. Portland has been really bad at covering a three-point line so far this year, even just from the spot perspective, right? So zone shooting, almost 40% allowed in the last 10 games from above the break three. The corner threes, they're both 46.5% from the right and the left. So terrible, terrible, terrible. But is Utah really going to be all that efficient from out there? Maybe not. I mean, yeah, they look good from the corner perspective, so maybe that's the direction to go in. But again, Utah would have to hit their shots to take advantage of the Portland weakness, which we don't even know if that's going to be the case. So I think I'm going to lean towards Portland. In terms of a total here, we're sitting at 227.5. Give me the under. I don't see either of these offenses really, fitting the mold for how to score against the opposing team. My one concern is taking an under here could be silly because both defenses are such trash. You know what I mean? We have the 30th and the 26th defensive efficiency ranked team this season. So not exactly the best spot there, but we'll see if we roll with anything in that game. Like I've said a million times, keep an eye on the final plays. But guys, that is going to wrap it up for today's show. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. If you did make it this far in the video, go ahead and comment 26. You made it to the 26-minute mark. I do appreciate it, and hopefully you guys had a great Christmas, not just from a betting perspective. Obviously, we went 4-0, like I said, in the NBA and 4-0 in the NFL, but had a great time seeing family and whatnot, and really did have a good time. Like I said, reporting from Hangover Central here. We're struggling because now I got to get on a plane in a couple hours, which is just going to knock me over dead. But either way, hopefully everyone did have a great Christmas or holiday season and anything like that. If you don't celebrate it, I saw a couple comments yesterday being like, hey, I don't celebrate it, but Merry Christmas to you. It's like, yeah, everyone, you know what I mean? If you didn't celebrate Christmas, then me saying Merry Christmas is essentially me being like, hopefully you had a good day yesterday then. Take it like that, I guess. But overall, we'll catch you guys in the next one, all right? Peace out.